I learned the rhythm of the factory long before I learned how to dream. The hum of machines, the scrape of metal, the scent of oil clinging to my clothes, those were the sounds and smells of my childhood. While other girls my age spent their afternoons laughing in cafes or scrolling through their phones, I stayed late, sleeves rolled up, fingers smudged with grease and ink. I worked quietly, never asking for praise, never demanding acknowledgement. I believed effort spoke louder than words. I was 18 when I officially started working full-time for the family business, though in truth, I had been there for years already. After school, during holidays, on weekends, I showed up. I filed invoices, tracked inventory, trained new workers, and fixed mistakes before anyone noticed they existed. When systems broke, I stayed up all night rebuilding them. When deadlines loomed, I skipped meals to meet them. And I was never paid. "It's for the family," Mom would say gently, as if that explained everything. "One day, it will all be yours," Dad would add, pride flickering briefly in his eyes. So I stayed silent. Silence became my language. I didn't complain about the 60-hour weeks. I didn't argue when my name was left off decisions I had already made behind the scenes. I didn't flinch when my ideas were repeated by others and praised as brilliant, while mine were called helpful suggestions. I told myself patience was strength. College was no different. I studied business while still running half of one. I took online classes during lunch breaks, memorized formulas between phone calls with suppliers, and wrote papers after midnight when the factory lights finally went dark. Exhaustion became my normal state. Still, my grades were perfect. I graduated at the top of my class, believing, naively, that this would finally prove my worth. My sister, on the other hand, lived a different life. Lara breezed in occasionally, heels clicking against the concrete floor, complaining about the noise or the smell. She'd stay 10 minutes, take a few photos, then leave for brunch with friends. Everyone smiled when she appeared. Everyone noticed her. She was warmth and laughter and ease, the daughter who didn't carry burdens. I never resented her. Not then. I believed there was room for both of us. I believed my parents saw the difference between showing up and simply being loved. On the night before my graduation, I stayed late again. Alone in the office, I reviewed quarterly projections, numbers that only looked healthy because I had quietly corrected months of mismanagement. I stared at the screen and smiled to myself, imagining a future where my work would finally be acknowledged, where I wouldn't have to earn my place through silence. I locked the office, turned off the lights, and whispered into the empty space. I did everything right. I didn't know then that silence, no matter how loyal, is invisible to those who choose not to see. And I didn't know that the hands that built their dream would soon be dismissed as replaceable. Graduation day should have been the happiest moment of my life. The auditorium echoed with applause as my name was called. I walked across the stage, spine straight, heart pounding, the weight of every sleepless night pressing against my chest. When they placed the diploma in my hands, I thought of spreadsheets balanced on my knees, of factory floors instead of libraries, of silence instead of celebration. I scanned the crowd and found my parents. Mom waved enthusiastically. Dad clapped once, firm and proud. Lara smiled lazily, already bored. I told myself this was the beginning. That evening, they insisted on a family dinner. The table was set carefully, candles lit, food arranged like a ceremony. Something in the air felt rehearsed. My stomach tightened, but I ignored it. I had earned this moment. Surely, they would finally say it. "We've made a decision," Dad began, folding his napkin with unnecessary precision. My heart leapt. Mom reached for her glass, avoiding my eyes. "It's what's best for the family." I smiled, waiting. "The business will officially be transferred to Lara," Dad said. "Effective immediately." The words didn't make sense at first. They floated, meaningless, like a foreign language I hadn't learned yet. "What?" I asked softly. Lara didn't look up. She stirred her drink, unfazed, as if this had been discussed long before tonight. "I don't understand," I said. I just graduated. I've been running operations. You told me. Mom interrupted with a sigh so heavy it felt practiced. She leaned back in her chair, lips pursed. Oh honey, she said, shaking her head, you're just good with your hands, not your brain. The room went silent. I felt something inside me crack, not loudly, but deeply, like ice splitting underfoot. Every report I'd written, every strategy I'd built, every problem I'd solved without credit flashed before me. Not my brain? I repeated, my voice barely holding together. I planned our last expansion. I renegotiated supplier contracts. I reduced losses by 20%. Dad cleared his throat. You're reliable, he said. But leadership requires intuition. Presence. Lara has that. Lara finally looked at me then, eyes blank, almost apologetic, but not enough to refuse what she was being handed. I didn't ask for this, she murmured weakly. But she didn't decline it either. I realized then that my achievements had never been proof, only convenience. I had been useful, not valued. A tool, not a successor. The dinner continued around me, forks clinking, voices pretending nothing irreversible had just happened. I excused myself quietly. No one stopped me. In my childhood bedroom, I stared at the wall where certificates and schedules once hung. I remembered being 14, promising myself that if I worked harder than anyone else, love and recognition would follow. I had been wrong. That night, I understood something brutal and clear. They didn't underestimate me. They never saw me at all. And once you realize that, silence becomes unbearable. I didn't storm out. There was no dramatic argument, no slammed doors, no final speech where I demanded justice or begged to be seen. I simply stopped showing up. The morning after that dinner, my alarm rang at 5 as it always had. For years, my body had learned that sound meant responsibility, machines waiting, emails piling up, problems only I knew how to solve. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the echo fade, and for the first time, I didn't move. The factory opened without me. I imagined the confusion first. A mislabeled shipment. A missing file. A supplier asking for clarification no one could give. Small things, barely noticeable at the start. I knew exactly how long it would take before those cracks widened. I had built the systems, memorized their weaknesses, held them together with quiet vigilance. Still, no one called that day. I packed my belongings slowly. Not furniture, just the pieces of myself I had lent to a place that never claimed me. My notebooks full of handwritten corrections. My laptop, paid for with a scholarship. The spare keys I'd been trusted with because I never misused them. I left everything else behind. By the end of the week, the messages began. Where are the updated projections? The vendor contract is missing pages. Can you come in just for a few hours? I didn't reply. When Mom finally called, her voice was sharp with disbelief. You can't just abandon us, she said. Do you know how much we depend on you? The irony almost made me laugh. I didn't abandon you, I replied quietly. I was never chosen. She sighed, the same tired sound she used when I was a child asking for permission. You're being emotional. This isn't personal. It was the most personal thing of all. Days turned into weeks. Lara struggled publicly but insisted everything was fine. She hired consultants who didn't understand the business. She changed branding instead of fixing logistics. Losses grew. Whispers started among workers who had once come to me with their problems. No one apologized. So I moved forward. I applied for jobs using the experience I had been denied recognition for. Interviews were strange at first, people listening to me, nodding, impressed. When I was offered a position at a rival firm, with a real salary and authority, I cried in my car afterward, hands shaking on the steering wheel. Not from joy. From grief. I walked away empty-handed, no shares, no title, no acknowledgement of years given freely. But I carried something they had never taken the time to notice. My knowledge. My resilience. My worth. The day I signed my new contract, I deleted the factory's number from my phone. I didn't look back when I drove past the old building that evening. Some doors don't close loudly. They close when you finally realize you deserve to walk through a different one. By the time the phone rang, my life no longer felt like it belonged to someone else. 3 months had passed since I walked away. 3 months of proving, mostly to myself, that I was more than unpaid labor wrapped in loyalty. My new office was smaller than the one at the family factory, but it was bright, clean, and quiet in a way that felt respectful. The company trusted me. They listened. When I spoke, no one interrupted or softened my words to make them easier to swallow. I was reviewing a proposal when my phone vibrated. Dad. I stared at the screen for a long moment, my heartbeat steady instead of frantic. The old version of me would have answered immediately, already preparing to fix whatever was broken. This time I took a breath before tapping the screen. Hello? His voice was strained, stripped of authority. We have a problem. I leaned back in my chair, eyes drifting to the window. What kind? Our biggest client, he said. They're threatening to terminate the contract. They won't talk to Lara. They keep asking for you. There it was. The name of the client alone carried weight. They accounted for nearly a third of the company's annual revenue. Losing them wouldn't just hurt, it would expose every fragile decision that had followed my departure. I don't work there anymore, I said calmly. I know, Dad replied quickly. But this isn't about pride. This is about survival. Just come in. Explain things. Help us stabilize. Help us. I closed my eyes, memories rushing in, late nights, silent sacrifices, the way Mom's voice had cut through me at that dinner table. Not your brain. They already reached out to me, I said. The pause on the other end was heavy. What do you mean? I mean they called me last week, I continued, my voice steady. They offered me a position, here. They said they trusted my judgment. My strategy. My leadership. Another silence. This one sharper. You're taking our client? He asked, disbelief cracking through. They chose me, I corrected gently. The same way you didn't. I expected anger. Yelling. Accusations. Instead, I heard something softer, fear. We didn't know, he said quietly. I almost laughed. You did, I replied. You just decided it didn't matter. The contract was signed 2 days later. Clean. Fair. Mine. When the news broke, messages flooded in, workers, former partners, even Lara once. I didn't respond. Not out of spite, but because closure doesn't require explanation. That evening, I stood alone in my office, watching the city lights flicker on. I felt no triumph, no bitterness. Just balance. They had taken the business I helped build. I had taken back myself. And that was the sweetest revenge of all, not destruction, but dignity.